Hey everybody, what's happening? My name's Steven.
And I'm Spencer.
We work with Nexus Youth and Family Services here in Amador County. What we want to do today is bring you a presentation regarding marijuana. We know there's a lot of information out there and there's a lot of people that are self-proclaimed professionals when it comes to this, but what we want to do in this short period of time is give you as much information as possible so you can make healthy decisions when it comes to your life.
For sure. So first, let's kind of go over the chemical ingredients that make up the marijuana plant. So first we have over here CBD, or cannabidiol. That is actually the chemical in marijuana that has the medicinal purposes. That's what people use as medicine. And then you have THC, or tetrahydrocannabinol. That is the psychoactive ingredient in marijuana. So that would be the thing that produces the elated feeling. So CBD is the medicinal, THC is the psychoactive ingredient.
So when you say psychoactive, do you mean like when people say, I just love the feeling when it makes me high? Is that what you're talking about there?
Yeah, that would be exactly what I'm talking about. For sure.
And so on this next slide, what we want to do is this brief slide here covers a lot of things. And what we want you to notice is over closest to Spencer when it comes to drug usage, what drugs people are using and what percentage of dollars are being spent each day, each year on these drugs. And so as you can see, over 70% of people using drugs are using marijuana. The list here is obviously marijuana, then followed by cocaine, opiates, LSD, heroin, benzodiazepines, ecstasy, methamphetamines, mushrooms, and crack cocaine. There's a lot of heavy drugs that people would consider these, and we have time to talk about those in some other videos. But what's really, really important is that this is the average spent daily on drugs. That's a pretty astronomical number when it comes to all the other drugs, marijuana covering 70% of it.
Definitely. So next up, guys, what we usually do in class, we would ask you guys, hey, what are some reasons why people your age would use marijuana? Now, we get these answers from young people. We have a lot of different answers from young people, and these are kind of like the top ones that we usually get in class. First one is always to relieve feelings of anger, anxiety, depression, or stress. I think stress and anxiety are probably the two biggest ones we usually get, right, Steve? Yeah, so stress and anxiety are usually the biggest ones. It helps me de-stress, it helps me calm down, whatever that may be. The key to remember, though, guys, is marijuana, we'll talk about this on the next slide, but marijuana is legal in California for recreational use as long as you're 21. So under 21, it's still illegal, just like drinking. So we don't condone any young people using marijuana. But that is one of the reasons, to reduce anger, reduce stress, to reduce anxiety, things like that. Next one we hear is, hey, I just wanted to fit in. My friend had it. He asked me to try it. They asked me to try it, whatever, So peer pressure, just wanting to fit in with your peer group.
Quick story, if you don't mind.
Yeah.
My first day of high school, I was asked by somebody that was a complete stranger if I wanted to use marijuana. First day as a freshman on campus, this guy says, hey, you want to go around here and smoke some marijuana with me? And I'm like, no, I'm good. And one, I didn't know the guy. Two, I had no idea what this marijuana thing was that he was talking about. And so all my friends kind of went around the corner and went with him. They succumbed to that peer pressure. So it's really a powerful thing when it comes to falling in line with people.
Definitely. And that's the thing about peer pressure, like with that story Steven just said, you always think of peer pressure as somebody constantly badgering you. That wasn't that much pressure.
No.
That was just somebody asking a question, and some of Steven's friends decided, hey, we're going to go with this guy, and Steven was like, no, I'm okay, I don't really know you, man. So, I mean, that's not a whole lot of pressure, but it still is considered peer pressure. Next one on the list here is a friend or a family member who is already using marijuana. So family member in particular, we already talked about friends up here, but family member in particular could be a parent, a brother, cousin, somebody that lives in the house with you that uses marijuana frequently and makes you want to try it yourself. Next one on the list is they say they just enjoy the high, or that feels good. And like I said, we have to be real careful with that because enjoying it like that could lead to dependence, which could eventually lead to addiction, which we'll talk about later on this presentation. Another reason is that it helps with sleep. Some young people tell us, hey, I can't sleep at night, so this helps me get to sleep. And then on the bottom there, we have use to forget, escape, or relax from the real world. So whatever it may be, again, that goes up, kind of back up to the top up here where we talk about the depression and things like that. They use it just as a way to kind of get out and to escape a little bit.
On this, Spence, like the use to forget or escape, relax, it kind of seems like a coping mechanism, right?
Definitely.
And so obviously we want to find healthier coping mechanisms, especially because one, this is illegal for the students. But this is why some of the people their age choose to use marijuana. Why do some adults choose to use marijuana?
Well, I would say a lot of the same reasons, to be honest. You can see the anxiety and stress levels. That could be a big thing, especially with adults. So they could use it to relieve that. They could also be using it as a coping mechanism. We talked about in our alcohol video how dangerous using drugs and alcohol are as coping mechanisms, because it doesn't get rid of your problem. It actually can worsen your problem. So even smoking weed can make your problem even worse. It doesn't make it go away. It just kind of masks it for a very short period of time. And adults can, usually adults aren't going to really give in to peer pressure or things like that. But it could be helping with sleep. It could be, using it to forget and using it as a coping mechanism. So there are all these reasons that are very similar to why adults would use that young people do as well.
Okay, makes sense. Makes sense. And then we have these California marijuana laws. This one is really interesting because as of January 1, 2018, California began its first day of adult cannabis sales. Like as Spencer mentioned, you have to be 21, and that goes to our next point. It says it's illegal to have, purchase, or use marijuana if you are under the age of 21. We do not condone the use of marijuana or anything that's illegal, obviously because this is going to you and you're in middle school, so you're not of age. And so it's also illegal to give or sell retail cannabis to minors. So you could get in trouble with the law. Somebody selling it to you could get in trouble in the law, as they should, because it's illegal. It's also illegal to drive under the influence of cannabis. It's really important that we usually hear this term DUI. We automatically assume that it's driving under the influence of alcohol. That can be the case, but you can also get in trouble. Your parents or whoever you know, family members, if they're driving under the influence of cannabis, they could potentially be arrested for driving under the influence of so.
Yep, and they are actually working, sorry to cut you off, but they're working right now, guys, to create field sobriety tests, much like they do for alcohol, for somebody who could have been smoking marijuana as they're driving or before they drove.
Okay. And so it's also illegal to consume, smoke, eat, or vape cannabis in public. So we know in California that marijuana is legal. And so we tend to think that that's just kind of a free-for-all, when in reality, that's not the case. You're not allowed to use it on state property. You're not allowed to use it in public. You're not allowed to use it on federal land. It's illegal. And we really want you to understand that it is illegal for you. And so we want to make sure that you understand that, and we would discourage any sort of use until you're at least the age of 21.
So here we go. We talk about how marijuana affects youth in their bodies and their brains and things like that. So first of all, it says here, does marijuana affect your brain? Yes, it does. It can change the way your nerve cells communicate with one another. And as we've talked about before in our previous videos, your brain is still continuing to develop right now. And it's going to continue to develop until you're about 25. So if you're using a substance like marijuana at a young age, it can hinder your brain growth and your brain development. So you have to be very careful with that. The next point up here is one we get a lot, and we hear it from young people, especially kids in high school and junior high a lot, is that, oh, marijuana is not addictive, you can't get addicted to it, no matter what. I hear this from youth a lot, and they'll tell me, these are the same ones that will tell me, hey, you know what, I'm not addicted to it, but I do have to smoke marijuana every day in order to get through my day. If you have to use a substance every day in order to act what you consider normal, then you are addicted to that substance, whether it's coffee, whether it's cigarettes, tobacco, nicotine, whether it's marijuana, alcohol. If you have to use it every day, you're addicted to it. And as it says up here, 62% of teens in rehab are there because of a marijuana addiction. So yes, addiction to marijuana is definitely real. And say 17% or 1 in 6 teens that try marijuana will become addicted in their lifetime. And also it's important to note here that THC levels over time have increased, yet CBD, which we talked about earlier, has the medicinal benefits, have started to decrease. So there were studies done in the 1970s, and this is when the government itself first started to actually do studies on marijuana to see its viability for medicinal purposes. Back then, the THC levels were typically about 3 to 5%. That's for your street level marijuana. Today's marijuana has THC content between about 12 to 20 on average, and then the concentrates can get all the way up to about 80 to 95%. So the studies that were done in the 70s that actually get quoted a lot that talk about how good marijuana can be, they always quote these 1970s studies. However, like I said, you can see here how much more the THC levels have increased over time, which means that we don't know yet, especially with these concentrates at 80 to 95%, what exactly they do to a human body or brain over time.
And I think it's also important to mention that, you know, the use of these addictive chemicals that are in marijuana, it as the THC levels increase, the hijacking of the reward pathway, right? It needs it, and it keeps needing it and needing it, and so that's where it becomes the addiction, as you're saying. And so it's really important that we understand that, as Spencer mentioned, the 70s and 80s, the marijuana from then is extremely different than what's being used now, and the increased levels of THC will then just continue to drive that addiction to the other people.
Yeah, most definitely.
And so what we're going to do now is we're going to talk just quickly about some short-term effects when it comes to marijuana use. You may know somebody that used marijuana. Typically when we ask this question, who do you know, or who knows somebody that uses marijuana, everybody in the classroom's hand raises. And so when it comes to marijuana, there's some short-term effects, and there's also some long-term with the addiction that can come into play. But these are some of the short-term effects. Red eyes, dry mouth, a funny skin sensation, short-term memory loss, or even potentially long-term, paranoia, impaired motor coordination, increased appetite. That's when people often say that they're getting the munchies or whatever it might be. Pleasure and bliss, they enjoy that feeling. Delayed response, altered perception, muscle relaxation, and increased heart rate. Some of these things you would be able to see. Some of these things you can't see. For instance, dry mouth, skin sensation, memory loss, increased appetite. Those are things that you can't typically see when somebody is high using marijuana. You might be able to see it or based on their the way they're acting or carrying themselves, but when it comes to paranoia or to their red eyes or the increased heart rate because they are now sweating, those are signs that you might be able to say, oh, maybe that person's using marijuana. But these are short-term effects, like almost not just immediate, but within a short time frame. These are effects that could potentially go onto your body.
Definitely. So now let's talk about marijuana being used as medication. I've talked to you a little bit earlier about the CBD aspect in marijuana being the ingredient in it that has the medicinal purposes. Unfortunately, what we see going on, though I talked about on the slide before, or a couple slides ago, is that we're seeing THC being increased in marijuana plants and the CBD kind of being decreased. That was the trend for about 15 years or so. Over the last 5 or 6 years, that trend's kind of started to change a little bit because people are starting to really realize the advances of CBD and things like CBD oils and creams and stuff like that, and how it can help with certain things. And if you eliminate the THC out of there, you don't get any of the elated feeling or things like that. It's also really important to note that the FDA, which is the branch of the government that approves all of our medications, has never approved marijuana as a medicine. So that's why it has to be approved at a state level, but federally it's still looked at as an illegal drug. So marijuana, it's important to understand too that marijuana is also responsible for the highest emergency room visits, surpassing all other substances, illegal or legal. So that could be for a variety of different reasons, but it does account for more hospital or more emergency room visits than any other drug. It's also important to note that it's both addictive and harmful to the human brain, especially when used as an adolescent. I already talked about how your brain is developing right now, and will continue to do so until you're about 25. And also on the bottom here, it's important to understand that if somebody's getting marijuana from any kind of guy on the street, it could be laced with any one or multiple of these things. We have here lead or other heavy materials, fungus, bacteria, PCP, heroin, embalming fluid, ketamine, cocaine, LSD, all kinds of things. It can be mixed with anything, and on the surface, when a person looked at it, they wouldn't notice that stuff was there. So being very cautious is key at all times.
Absolutely, and I think one thing that I've seen and working with youth, there have been people that say, oh, I just smoked marijuana. No big deal, right? Well, when they have a urinalysis or a pee test done and some of these other drugs show up, questions start to be asked, well, was that really all you did? And the answer might have been, yes, that's all you thought you did. without having these other ingredients or these other chemicals or other drugs in the marijuana as well.
Yeah.
And so it's really important, you guys, as we give you a very short sample of this topic. Many of you will have us at the next high school level, and we want to give you as much information as we can. We know that there are self-proclaimed experts, and we're not going to say we're that. We want to give you the information so you can make healthy, positive decisions when it comes to your life and being presented with the opportunity to use marijuana. Mm-hmm. We also know it could be like your first day of high school. It could be 7th grade, it could be 8th grade. It could happen out at the store. It could happen wherever. It's so common now, especially in the area that we live in. So we want to encourage you to make sure that you learn about these things. We want to encourage you to not use any sort of substance or any substance really that's requires you to be 21 years old until you're 21. So we would encourage you to do that. And also, you guys, if you would, check us out on YouTube. We got a YouTube page that has a bunch of our videos on it from different departments within Nexus. We would love for you guys to check out. We'd love for you to share it. You can subscribe. You can click the little bell to get notifications that, hey, we've posted a new video. So again, we would love for you guys to, if you have any questions for us, please reach out to us here at Nexus. Our telephone number is 209-257-1980.
And as always, guys, stay healthy and stay safe.